Hello, everybody. Welcome to this inaugural episode of the Shiitake Show, your source for gaming news and analysis. I'm Fishchamp, and here with me is my co-host, Kaiju.
Yes, indeed. To kick off the inaugural episode, Nintendo has released a promotional video of the next generation of the handheld family with the Nintendo 2DS XL. Retailing at $150, this latest iteration focuses on increased performance and decreased price, hoping to piggyback off the success of its predecessor, the Nintendo 2DS. Now, I have owned a Nintendo 3DS and currently own a new Nintendo 3DS XL. However, Fishchamp, prior to owning his current new Nintendo 3DS XL, did in fact own a 2DS, so he definitely has an opinion on this successor to his abandoned console. Fishchamp, your thoughts?
Yeah, the thing about this new Nintendo 2DS XL, I mean, it's yet another one of Nintendo's iterations of the 3DS. Like we needed more of them. But it kind of blindsided me. It kind of blindsided everyone. Like the first I heard of it was on a Twitch chat, and I was literally thinking that they were just throwing some sort of meme or joke around. Like, oh, haha, that's funny. The new Nintendo 2DS XL, like that'll ever happen. And then I went to my YouTube subscriptions and it was a real thing.
Indeed.
And so it was kind of a shock. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that struck me about it, though, was that previously, like, the main selling point, and I remember you telling me this when you had your 2DS and when you were making the transition to your 3DS, I remember you very poignantly saying that the one thing that you didn't like about the 3DS was that it had the hinge where it would rotate back and forth. And I really felt like that was the distinguishing feature of the 2DS, was that it didn't collapse, right? It was less susceptible to that sort of damage. And to me, maybe I'm wrong, but like, this doesn't really feel like it's that much different from a 3DS. If anything, the main differentiating factor is something that it doesn't have, which is 3D, right? Like, I don't really see the main difference. I mean, yeah, it has more rounded edges, but like, what is the main difference between it and a 3DS? And I really don't see it other than decreased price and, you know, and the lack of 3D. But I mean, is that really something to, you know, start a whole campaign over? I don't really think so. I mean, maybe you have different thoughts because you owned a 2DS, but
exactly. No, I think I concur with you there. And the reason why is because as a former 2DS owner myself, the main reasons why I got a 2DS, it was an affordable way to get into the 3DS library, right? And then secondly, I didn't really care so much about the 3D as much as being able to play those games. And in fact, as you noted, I wasn't really a fan of the hinges. Like I'm rather, what's the word? Paranoid about hinges. I've had hinges break on me and whatnot. So that wasn't really what I wanted to go for. So that's why I got a 2DS, because it was cheaper. I could play the games. And also I have somewhat large hands. And so the hashtag one hand and the bigger buttons. I really liked the huge L and R buttons on the 2DS. I just how it fit in my hands. It felt very good. But as you just mentioned, when I watched this trailer, I'm just sitting here thinking, why? Like that's just the one word that can sum up my reaction to this. Why? Like, not necessarily it looks bad. I mean, I think it looks pretty cool, actually. The only things that make it different from a new 3DS are the fact that it doesn't have 3D and it's cheaper. That's it. They could have named this like the basic Nintendo 3DS XL or something. Like, in fact, I don't think it should have been named a 2DS at all, because the whole point of the 2DS was that it did not have a hinge and it was 2D. It just had those two screens, you know, and you didn't have to deal with the hinge at all. So I don't know. I'm very mixed. I don't get why they're doing this, why they're introducing this new line, especially when they're ending the classic NES, which has a huge demand. You know, it has a gigantic demand. People are, you know, banging on Nintendo's doors to get them, and they're ending that in favor of something that I don't think really needs to exist.
Yeah. Well,
sometimes Nintendo's business decisions puzzle me.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about the the systems that they're discontinuing in favor of this. But one of the things that I felt was rather interesting is that part of the intrigue about the new 3DS XL when it was released, I think it was released a couple years ago. Well, I know it was released a couple years ago. How many? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But was that it, in a sense, eclipsed the need for the 2DS, right? Because the main problem with the original 3DS was that the 3D was categorically awful, right? I owned a 3DS, and I can remember using the 3D maybe like when I first opened it, and then never again, right? It would just desync. It would ruin the gameplay, really, right? The 2DS came. The 2DS was like, okay, we'll scrap that extraneous feature, and we'll just give you a raw gaming system that doesn't have any of that nonsense, right? Okay, then enter the 3DS XL, like the new Nintendo 3DS XL, right? And this one offers you a 3DS experience that is actually good, right? It actually works, right? The camera follows you, so it doesn't desync. And so it actually is good, and I actually use 3DS, and I've seen you play on it, and I've seen you use 3DS, the 3D.
Yeah, the 3D on the new 3DS XL is great. There's no desyncing issues at all. I actually like using the 3D on it.
Right. And so in a sense, I felt like this new 2DS XL was sort of like a solution to a problem that didn't exist, right? It was like it's no longer needed. And while you could say, oh, well, it's cheaper. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could say that, but I mean, the 3D experience is something that, you know, is built into the franchise, something that is, you know, the demarcation of the handheld system, this generation of the handheld system, right, is the 3D. Yeah. And so when you're taking that away for, what is it, a $50 savings, I'm not really sure that that's going to have much appeal.
I'm not convinced that this is going to be a success, really, because for the reasons you mentioned. And also, I got my new 3DS XL for $150. I got it refurbished off eBay, and it works just like as if it was a new 3DS XL. Okay, that's kind of a awkward way of saying it, but you get what I mean. Like a brand new 3DS XL. Right. It plays exactly like that. And so, with the only difference being there's no 3D, for a $50 price shave, I don't know. It doesn't really. This doesn't really scream a success or a bestseller to me. Like, maybe it will. Maybe people are really going to be into that lower price or something, but I just don't see its necessity. I don't see why it needs to exist. It solved a problem that wasn't really there, like you mentioned. And can I just be a little bit more down to earth for a second here? The trailer itself, I mean, I don't like being hypercritical about things, but the trailer itself looked like it was made by not someone other than Nintendo. It literally looked like a fake trailer to me. Like, I don't know if you thought that as well, but
the product itself struck
the product itself, the product itself, I feel, is based on a flawed premise, and so how you sell it is also going to come off as somewhat not genuine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. And one of the things that struck me as well about, if we're talking about the trailer, is that there wasn't, there was usually what happens when they're advertising new systems, something that I think would be essential to just the financial, just the marketing aspect of any system, is that you're advertising something new. And there was absolutely nothing new about this, right? The things that they were advertising were built-in Amiibo support. Newsflash, that's already there on the new 3DS.
Had that for 2 years already.
Right? They advertised the C-Stick, right? Already there, right? And then the main kicker, the thing that I think makes this one worse than the 2DS, is something that you already mentioned, and that is that the back buttons, right? It gives you the 2 additional back buttons, but they're now the same size. So for people who struggle with, you know, the back buttons, right? And I think the problem's overhyped, but for those people who think that they have a problem with them, they're not going to be alerted to this system anymore, right?
No.
So like now some NBA player with these hands bigger than, you know, a puppy, I mean, you know, they might have been attracted to the 2DS, but they're now certainly not going to be attracted to the 2DS XL, at least not for the same reasons that they would be attracted to the 2DS, right? But pegging
Ultimately,
on your point,
yeah.
but pegging on your point that you mentioned briefly about the systems that they're discontinuing in favor of this, that is perhaps the most injurious and the most insulting aspect of this. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree, because I don't necessarily have a huge problem with the existence of this thing. Like, I don't think it should exist, but I mean, hey, Nintendo wants to do this little experiment. Okay, that's fine by me. I mean, it's their money that they're throwing at this, right? You know, I don't think there's going to be such a huge sinkhole of money that it's going to like doom them or something. Like, you know, that's definitely not what I think. But like you mentioned, I think just the kind of the slap in the face from all of this is that they're discontinuing the classic NES in favor of a console that doesn't need to exist.
Right, and I've stepped into many GameStops since I've since that the new NES, the remake has been released, and I can say probably 3/4 of the time that I've gone into the store, there's been at least one person requesting for that console, right? So yeah, Nintendo
popularity is not a question. I mean, you barely can find it in the stores at all. It's almost like the Amiibo situation back when they were first being released. You know, they were so popular that the scalpers would just pick them up and then resell them for 2-3 times their value. Guess what? That's what happened with the classic NES. Supply side problems, which we've seen from Nintendo time and time again. So rather than increase production of the classic NES, you know, placate those fans who want to have that classic game experience, they're just discontinuing it altogether.
Right.
Like, it just seems like a big slap in the face.
Yeah. And considering that, and not, I mean, one could argue that from a consumer standpoint, and of course this show's not intended to be economical, but from a consumer standpoint, yeah, it's an insult. But I would consider it more to be an insult to Nintendo itself, right? Like, they've generated the demand for this new console, the NES, right? And then they're just going to discontinue it in favor of something that has hitherto generated no interest at all. Like, I don't think I've ever heard, and I've been on Reddit, and I'm on the internet, and I don't think I've ever really heard of someone saying that they wish there was a 2DS version or an updated 2DS version of the new Nintendo 3DS, right?
Yeah, I don't think I've heard about that either.
Like, I think the 3DS, the new 3DS XL, I mean, I've seen people review it on YouTube, and I've seen official reviews, and the ubiquitous comment that almost everyone makes is that it is, in a lot of senses, the panacea to the problem that the original 3DS had and that the new Nintendo 3DS tried to solve.
Yeah, how can you get better than that is kind of the impression that I get from those sort of reviews. Now, just to play devil's advocate here for a second, because, you know, I'm not an expert on business per se and business dealings, but I have heard and I've seen some people come to Nintendo's defense where they're like, here's the thing with the classic NES. It could have been intended to be a seasonal item, something to be, you know, kind of a go-between during a slower point in Nintendo's holiday sales. Because, like, remember, Nintendo didn't really have anything major for the Wii U or the 3DS, aside from Sun and Moon, Pokemon Sun and Moon, you know, but they didn't really have a new blockbuster thing for the Wii U. In fact, they were phasing out the Wii U in favor of the Switch, which was announced around that time. So, you know, Nintendo's holiday season, they needed to have something to kind of be a stopgap. So they created the classic NES. They didn't make enough of them. And the other defense I hear on that decision is that they might be planning on releasing a classic SNES, or they might be planning on releasing a giant virtual console bundle of NES and SNES games on the Switch or something. I don't know. Which would render the classic NES somewhat irrelevant at that point. But I think even if you grant Nintendo that, just the perception, the public relations perception of ending a very popular product line in favor of something which nobody asked for, kind of iffy.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be a good PR move in general. Like, it doesn't seem like it'd be something that a smart businessman or woman would do, right? Like, it doesn't seem like this would be something that you would see from a professional gaming company. And as you said, it had like this faint, eerie sense about it that it was in fact a fake, until we found out that it was actually not.
Right. Yeah, that was my immediate reaction. Is it has to be some joke. It has to be a fake. But nope, it was a real thing.
Indeed. And I do want to touch a bit on some of the positive aspects of it, because there is something good that we can glean from this, albeit small, but there is something good that we can glean from this, and I'll talk about it in a second, but I'll just levy my final concern, and then we can move on to what I think is good about it. And my final concern is that, and it's very petty, but it's just something to part with, and that is that the console itself, to me, looks extremely ugly. I don't know if you would.
I don't know. I kind of disagree with you there. I mean, of course, Japan only exclusive gets the really nice, cool looking skins and designs. But if you look at the Japanese exclusive colors for this thing, I'll admit it looks pretty cool. Now, I'm not quite as big a fan of the American design, which is what we saw in the trailer, and so I somewhat agree with you on that. But no, I think the Japanese colors, I think they actually look pretty cool.
Well, yeah, but it's comparing apples to oranges, because you would have to compare the Japanese versions of the new Nintendo 2DS XL to the new Nintendo 3DS XL, right? And they both get better versions, right? So, but if you're comparing the American version of the Nintendo 3DS XL or 2DS XL to Japanese, that's in a sense comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah,
I consider. So what I'm thinking is, I'm thinking of, you know, the 3DS XL colors vis-a-vis the 2DS XL colors, and I don't like, on the color scale there's no real difference that I see. It's on the design scale. Like, to me it feels like there's just some corners that I feel were cut, and I say that in a literal and figurative aspect. Like, they literally did cut the corners.
I see what you did there.
They literally did cut the corners on the side of the 2DS XL, and I don't like that. But there's also some other things too that I noticed. For one is like the hinge. The hinge does not go all the way across the perimeter. It's like only halfway. It's like,
yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah,
and I don't know. I just really, the design did not strike me as something palatable. But with regards to this one thing that I think is good that we can glean from this, and we've been spending our inaugural episode just completely lambasting the Nintendo 2DS XL. But there is something good that we can glean from this, I think, and that is that it does provide a sense of security to anyone who is thinking that Nintendo would be pivoting away from handheld consoles, or at least the new Nintendo 3DS XL consoles, right? So what this guarantees us, and we did have some reassurance, so it's not exactly unique, but the fact that they're releasing a new console at this time is something that is very good, because they wouldn't be releasing a new console for, you know, a system that's going to be discontinued in 1 to 2 years, right?
Right. And just to be clear to our viewers, we're referring to the ecosystem of the 3DS itself. So, like, if Nintendo wasn't planning on making more 3DS games, why on earth would they be releasing a new Nintendo 2DS XL? Like, it would make no business sense. So this shows that they're going to be supporting this line of systems at the very least through 2018, if not 2019.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like, what I'm saying is, when it comes to the handheld system, one of the concerns that I know that you and I shared, and that I've seen other people share as well, is that Nintendo, because there were thoughts that Nintendo was going to merge handheld with console, and in many senses they did, right? I mean, they definitely did, right?
With the Switch,
yeah, with the Switch, handheld and console are now merged. One of the concerns that sort of emerged from that was that the 3DS family, which has been wildly successful, was going to be discontinued, right? Now, from a business perspective from Nintendo, I always was skeptical of those concerns, because why would you ever discontinue the system that has been probably the most successful system you have? I'm not exactly sure on the numbers, but I think the Nintendo DS is the best-selling. I know it's the best-selling handheld system of all time. That's obvious, but I'm not sure how it ranks in terms of systems overall, and I'm pretty sure it ranks pretty highly, right? So the
3DS, I think, is second only to the DS. I'm not sure if the Game Boy eclipses, but the point is that the 3DS family has been extraordinarily successful.
Right. And I know that you are, and I am a big fan of the DS family, right? I love that family. I think the design of the DS is very well designed. Like I just love the feel of the DS, and like I just don't really think that it would sit well with me or with many Nintendo players if it was all merged into one console, right? Like I really do feel like the distinction between console and handheld is a distinction that I think is good, right? Like
I think it ought to be maintained.
Now, the caveat to that is if handheld is maintained and then console merges as well, that's fine as well. Like I'm fine with that. Like if the Switch is also handheld, that's good. But as long as there's something that's exclusively handheld, then I'm totally fine. And so in a lot of senses, Nintendo has with the decision to continue the DS, I think Nintendo has really hit the nail on the head with its consumers in this front, right? They realize that there still is a demand for the DS.
Little aspect,
right. They realize that there still is a demand for the DS, so they're not going to discontinue it. And then obviously we've seen that the Switch is absolutely killing it in terms of sales.
Yeah, the Switch is off to a fantastic start. So definitely. All right. Well, that's pretty much a wrap. So basically, in summary, we don't really get why this thing exists, but at the same time, we think that it's a good sign that Nintendo is continuing to support the handheld side of things. Anyway, that's a wrap. I'm Fish Champ, and this has been me and your co-host, Kaiju, on our inaugural episode of the Shiitake Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. See y'all later.
Bye-bye.